I am the famous American, and welcome to this video, which we're going to take a look at a comment and try to learn from it. I'm going to try to learn from it. We might learn from each other. But I made a video called "The Term Aliens is Offensive to Extraterrestrials, Being Offended on Behalf of Others." So if you haven't checked out the video, I invite you to do so. Do not be confused by the title. Just because I title something for a video doesn't mean that I am agreeing with the statement. I'm asking the question maybe based on someone else's perception, which a lot of my videos are. It's not me saying this is what I believe. Usually I'm just asking questions, and that's really a lot of times what my videos are. So Anna's Mind 444 left me this comment. It was a pretty long comment, so I'm actually going to skip down to the bottom, but or I'm going to kind of start with certain parts of it. She says, maybe it's American Jews who are indeed somewhat responsible for the statement being that Jewish people tend to be financially successful here in the United States. That was the stereotype that I often talk about, I often defend, because if you are in the United States, you know that the entertainment industry would not exist if it were not for Jewish Americans. You know that the financial industry, as we know it, would not quite be what it is if it weren't for American Jews. It's hard to argue that fact. So here's what she said. Maybe it's American Jews who are indeed somewhat responsible for that statement, and the rest of the world then finds it a bit unfair because they do not belong to nor own half a company or the industry. I'm going to skip down to the bottom. She says, if I come to think about it, if someone told me something about, quote, rich Jews, the most likely they're thinking of American nationality. Okay, so let me just explore that. So here's what I'm really asking, okay? Because here in the United States, if you grew up here, when you think of Jewish people, you often think of financially stable, independent, thriving people. That doesn't mean all Jewish people are in the United States, but that is the concept. And there's a good reason for that, as I've explained in many videos before. But I can recognize it may not be that way across the world. Maybe specifically there's something special about Jewish people coming to the United States and they finally got their break. And that's what I've been saying for years that I've done this channel, that there was something special about that. In fact, my understanding, that doesn't make sense. In fact, my understanding. How can it be fact if it's just my opinion or my understanding? But it is my understanding that there are just as many, if not more, people of Jewish descent, people who identify as Jewish in the United States as there actually are in Israel, which I understand is about the size of New Jersey. So I've been saying this for years, that in essence, it's like the United States has become, a new version of Israel 2.0. So, is that an American mindset to assume that if you're Jewish, you probably are financially successful? Now, that's not to say that other groups of people aren't, but specifically, this is what really kind of helped me understand it. You look up any actor on Wikipedia and look at early life. It'll tell you their ethnic background. It's amazing how many famous actors, they're of Jewish descent. It's not a coincidence. You look at who owns record companies, movie companies, look at who's at the top of banks, and you look them up on Wikipedia, you're gonna find Jewish descent. So, now granted, there are other ethnic backgrounds or people groups that lend themselves more so to other things. For example, there's not as many Jewish singers in the United States throughout our history. No, the majority of them are actually not Jewish. I'd say that the majority of the most successful singers in the United States would be of African American descent or Italian American descent. Specifically, there's a trend there. But Jewish people, not so much often the singers, maybe the songwriters, maybe the producers, but they're often not the ones, like the lead singer of Maroon 5. Yeah, he'd be an exception. But usually they're not the ones. Like Bruce Springsteen, a legendary American musician, not Jewish at all. Dutch, but mainly Italian descent. So I think that's interesting. So help me understand, because remember, I live in the United States. I've traveled the world, but I've only lived here long term. I spent 2 summers in Thailand. I spent some time in Korea, New Zealand, obviously Canada. I've been to Trinidad and Tobago. I've been to Ecuador. So I've been to lots of places. I haven't only been in the United States, but I grew up here. This is my mentality. This is my perspective. I love to make these videos because I get to see what the rest of the world perceives as reality. So, is it an American stereotype, shall we say, that when we think of someone being, quote, a rich Jewish person or financially independent Jewish person, that's more of an American concept, the way we perceive American Jews specifically? Now, closing thought, if I wanted to, I could do a whole list of all the successful Jewish people in the world that aren't even American. We could look at people who have started the companies that have the DNA test, and we could find out, oh yeah, they're not actually American, but they're Jewish. Your comments belong right here.